Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel here, and I'm giving you my newest movie review for you guys here. And of course, it's a quiet burp, but about a week and a half ago, I made a bit of a mini review of 20 Years Later, The Bone Temple, back when it came out. Since then, my thoughts have really come more. And as I said in my short of the video in particular, this is easily the best and my favorite. I'm gonna say my favorite, but the best of the 28 years franchise since the very first. I do think it has a much more cohesive vision, a much more clear, cold perspective. I think Nia DaCosta's more straightforward yet dynamic directing is much more helpful than Danny Boyle and Alex Garland's attempt from last year. It's weird because those two are the same guys who came in and redefined it, but I felt like last year's movie was such a Frankenstein of a movie that never really made a cohesive sense of self. Like, it's a movie that I thought was both technically good but also technically bad at the same time. And in my mind, one thing, like, after watching, Jesus Christ, my parents are making a lot of noise upstairs. But after watching this movie of Bone Temple, it made me want to revisit 20 years later, and maybe I'll make a full review, like, back when it turns 1 year old this year. Maybe I'll make a review of that and make it come forward. But I really thought this was a big step up, because I felt like the cohesive direction and the writing and the focus and the narratives of this movie was much more intact and focused, rather than last year's 20 years later, because that movie felt very scattershot. A good idea, it's a great philosophical idea, good tension and everything, but it felt like the internal editing and focus of that movie felt very jumbled. Where this movie's narrative focused and craft and ideals is much more well set up and had better execution. It felt like the beginning of 28 years later felt like it was a better setup for this movie than it was for the last movie, because the beginning of that movie felt like it was like, oh, this person they set up in the beginning, and then felt like it was put on ice to the end, and it felt like Aaron Taylor Johnson's character felt more superfluous than really much more. I thought that movie would be much more character driven, but in truth, last year's movie is much more plot driven. This movie feels a bit more of that meld of both, and with the kid in this movie, I think his name is Spike, if I recall. He represents the sense of falling in and out of the focus of this group. And I really like that, because his unsure nature and his want to do something different apart from his father to join this group, but also realizing just how sadistic and cult-like and mania-filled, as all cults are. That's all cults are, let's be real. But I thought this movie had a much more cohesive vision. I felt it was a lot more consistent on narrative and thrust. The beginning, like, hour, it definitely feels like it's just lulling through it, but that's also because the character of Spike in this movie feels very unsure of himself within the narrative. And that made much more sense reflecting on the movie, because for me, the first hour of this movie felt like a bit of a drag. Some good highlights, some moments. It's also brutal, gross, and visceral on every level, and it really does push a genre out of hand. And I really do admire the movie for that. The last 45 minutes of this movie are pure insanity, violent, and rock and roll, and how a difference within Spike's storyline within the cult of him of being the whole Jimmy's an aspect of that, and there's the other half with Ray Fiennes' character of, wanting to find this cure and everything. And I thought I would slightly prefer his half, but I felt at least with the kid's half was a little bit more consistent on focus, where there's times where it was very clever and unique on the scientific end of it, trying to find a cure and everything, but it felt a bit too indulgent at times in my mind. Like, there's a point to where Ray finds a character who's a doctor in this, and he's very much in truth kind of like trying to find experiments in mind and everything within it. But it's at times a tad too goofy in my mind. Like, there's a part where he's like, blows a dart gun into this zombie's neck, and he's kind of like, oh, experimenting with you. And there's times in my mind where it feels a bit too silly, but then again, that kind of makes sense with the character. Like, he should be dancing and or relaxing in the grass with this drugged up zombie, and I'm just like, what the hell are we doing here? Just, it made sense for the character, but I felt like we were either wasting time or it just felt too silly or indulgent, but it still made character sense, and at least I could forgive it on that front. And the parts near the end are pure, awesome, blood-curdling metal, and the needle drops in this are great, with, like, you know, Radiohead, The Cure, and a bunch of other bands you hear in this movie soundtrack, and I thought it was awesome. And the way it was shown magnetically within this frantic directing felt more hypnotic, and I felt like Mia DaCosta's more focused, magnetic directing felt more at hand, rather than the much more experienced Danny Boyle, who pretty much should know how this franchise works, but instead that movie felt more scattershot. Anyway, 28 years later, The Bone Temple in my mind is pretty damn fun, rambunctious, and gory as hell, and I thought it was a mostly great movie. I would give it a 7.7 out of 10. I would give it a 7.7 out of 10, and yeah, that's my overall thoughts, everyone. I'll see you in my next video, which I will make for my review of Markiplier's The Iron Lung. Till then, peace out. Bye.